Greetings to this video that we are producing, which goes along with our film documentary. It's kind of an introduction to the film documentary. The purpose of it is to get a little bit more acquainted with the air combat mission. It's a little bit strange and perhaps different to some people. And so that's the reason why we are doing this video now. The name of the film documentary is The Sonic Warrior. It is available on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, The Sonic Warrior. And so this video introduces the film documentary. And like I said, we're going to be talking about the air combat mission to help us understand what's going on in this particular environment, in this particular world, the world of the fighter pilot. It's a little bit strange, a little unusual, often quite exciting. I have always enjoyed it when I was up there in the atmosphere, flying at speeds above the speed of sound. Was pretty enjoyable as well. Quite challenging also. Okay, so let's get started with the air combat mission. My name is Captain Kevin Smith, and I am an author and speaker, as well as a naval aviator, a Navy fighter pilot, Top Gun pioneer, and a Sonic Warrior. I was on the ground floor of the supersonic era, where the Navy, as well as the Air Force and the Marine Corps as well, got very serious in getting into the supersonic era, the supersonic realm, supersonic combat operations and stuff like that. Okay, so let's dive right into the air combat mission. And this will give us a better idea of why, of course, we have this film documentary, as well as what's going on in two of the most famous movies out there. Top Gun 1 and Top Gun 2 movie. Top Gun Maverick movie is quite extraordinary. And what we're doing here kind of goes hand in glove with that great movie. And like I said, so the Top Gun Maverick movie did introduce or reintroduce, depending on your age, introduce or reintroduce a lot of the mission aspects of what we're going to be talking about today, and my film documentary does the same thing. Now, the perspective that I'm taking, I'm dealing with a carrier-centric operation. There are other operations out there from a number of different perspectives. My perspective is the aircraft carrier, the carrier task force, and also we have all kinds of acronyms for it. CTF 77 was the carrier task force that I was assigned to during a part of my naval career. All right, so this is a busy slide. What I wanted to point out, you don't have to memorize this or anything, but what I wanted to point out is air combat mission consists of a number of phases. We have the launch phase, we have the recovery phase, we have the ingress, egress, we have all kinds of things. A lot of things go on before we actually get to the battle space and engage the enemy. And then once we leave the battle space, we have also a lot of things that are going on as well. So that's the reason for this slide. Okay, the first order of business here is that, of course, we have briefed the mission, and we've done all kinds of mission planning, and we've gotten all the intelligence briefing and all kinds of things going on. We start the day with probably spending 2 to 3 hours briefing a particular mission. Could be longer, could be an all day briefing. It kind of depends on what's going on. All right, so that's all over. We get it on an airplane and we're getting ready to launch. So, the launch phase is what we are talking about now. In this particular case, because we are carrier based, the launch phase is helped along quite a bit by the catapult. So we get a catapult launch. So the launch from the catapult, we can see that. And the bottom picture, that is a picture of me, that I am actually on the number 4 catapult of the USS Constellation. And a couple of things that I'd like to point out on the bottom picture, and that is that I am in afterburner. You can see the flame coming out of the back of the engine. That means that I'm in afterburner. You notice that all the flight deck personnel, their heads are lowered. They have ducked. And the purpose of that is that they want their heads to be below the wing line of the airplane for obvious safety reasons. So this is the blow up. Here you can see everybody is ducked. They're watching the airplane. And in about a second, the airplane will be moving down the catapult. It takes about 2.4 seconds to get from 0 to 150 knots. That's 16 lateral G's, quite a lot of stress on the body in order to do that. Here is another picture of a catapult shot. This airplane is moving down the catapult. This is the airplane that I flew. Happens to be an FA Crusader, as well as those other airplanes that we looked at. That was also the FA Crusader. You notice that the afterburner flame is quite long. Probably 20 or 30 feet behind the airplane is the afterburner flame. And that helps us along. Obviously, we want to have max power for this catapult shot. And then, after we get airborne, the first thing that we do, likely, not always, but often, the first thing that we do is we top off. We hit the tanker and we fill up our fuel tanks as much as possible. And this is especially true if it's a relatively long range mission. So topping off, we call it the top off. Here you can see on the right picture, the probe is actually plugged into the basket, and it is taking fuel from the tanker airplane that you can see in the right picture. Also on the left picture, we can see the same kind of thing. We can actually see the probe, the area fueling probe from the airplane is connected with the fueling basket from the tanker airplane. A tanker is the airplane that carries the gas and transfers it to the tactical airplanes in a particular air wing. Here's the tanking operation. It's an operation that depicts an operation that I actually conducted. The tanker is actually an A7 aircraft configured for tanking. And the airplane receiving the fuel is an FA Crusader, and that's the airplane that I flew for the Navy as a Sonic Warrior. And I want to point out just a couple of quick things here. You notice the closeness. Yeah, you're fairly close in this particular operation, and so you do get a fair amount of downwash and jet wash that you have to deal with. Here is another, this is a great picture. Here you can see the refueling probe on the receiving airplane. You can see it extended, and then you can see the basket. Now, the pilot has to line the probe up with a basket, and sometimes that's a tricky maneuver. We actually do practice that. We have to practice it quite often to get good at it. Eventually, you get pretty good at it, and it becomes almost second nature. Not quite, because it's always a little bit of challenge there, and it does increase the tension to a certain extent. Here's another picture of the tanker airplane and the receiving airplane. These are both FA-18 Super Hornets, and this is a contemporary picture. This is actually what is going on right now. Okay, and then we join up after we top off. If we are going out as a flight, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we go out as a single ship or as a solo, but sometimes we do go out as a flight. And here we join up. Usually we join up over the carrier at about 10,000 feet. Now here we're going en route to the battle space. In this particular picture, this is a high altitude en route. Sometimes it's low altitude, high or medium altitude. Usually it's relatively high if it's appropriate to do that. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we go in at a very low altitude and a very high speed. All right, so you're en route to the battle space, and then we enter the battle space, and we are engaging in high-velocity aerial combat. And what does that mean? High-velocity aerial combat, I'm going to define it a little bit more precisely here. I'm going to call it close-in high-velocity aerial combat. So we are within visual range of the enemy, and that is the purpose of this particular combat engagement, is that we are going to be close in with the enemy. So it is going to be a close-in high-velocity aerial combat operation. Picture on the right is a painting of an actual event that had occurred during the Vietnam War. Okay, so high velocity aerial combat now brings to the forefront a whole bunch of things that were not presenting themselves prior to this era. Because of the velocities were not as high. But once we got into the supersonic era, high-velocity aerial combat became extraordinarily difficult to do for lots and lots of reasons. Some of them are, pretty obvious, and some of them are intuitive. Some of them are counterintuitive. One of the things is that the combat picture changes in seconds or a few seconds, sometimes microseconds. The combat picture is changing very, very rapidly. So a rapid change of the picture, situation awareness becomes extremely difficult, but vital. And so we have to get very good at situation awareness in a high velocity environment. And I call it sonic warfare. That's the term that I use. We have aerial combat, but what's also it's also sonic warfare because we are flying at speeds near, at, or above the speed of sound. And so it is sonic warfare. Now, sonic warfare requires a certain amount of skill sets. It brings to the problem space an enormous challenge. Challenge in weapon systems, challenge in human capabilities, human cognition, situation awareness, problem solving, complex problem solving, decision making, all kinds of challenges here. And we have to be able to execute the battle plan with precision and make adjustments in a matter of seconds. Adjustments have to be made. And that requires an extraordinary amount of training and experience. Here is an example. These two great pictures show an airplane that is going through the sound barrier. Now, what happens when you reach the speed of sound? Lots of things happen. One of them is you get what's called a compressibility effect or compression. What that basically means is that the atmosphere is a non-compressible gas except at the speed of sound, and then it becomes a compressible gas. And so the atmosphere is compressing here, and that's causing the cloud formation around these airplanes. And that brings to the forefront another serious issue, and I'm going to even call it a serious problem that we encountered when we encountered the compression of the air. One other thing was compressed, and that was time. We did encounter the realm of what we call time compression. Time compression is a very strange arena. It's a very strange aspect of reality. And basically what it means is this: the time required to do something is greater than the time available. So the time available and the time required don't match up. So if you have to do something under normal time conditions, under time compression, you have to do it quicker, or you can't do it. So a lot of things that enter into your problem space, a lot of things that you encounter, you can't deal with. You have to do a selection. You have to do what we call workload management. You have to manage your workload very precisely. And you have to learn to be able to do things under increased time compression. And that requires a lot of refinement in how you actually go about doing certain activities. So time compression becomes a huge concern, if you will. And then we get into air combat maneuvers. Air combat maneuvering is a very difficult thing because it's dealing with a four-dimensional problem space. What does that mean? A four-dimensional problem space includes the X, Y, and Z axis. So we're looking at a cube. So it's a cubical space. And it's also time critical. So the fourth dimension is time. So it's X, Y, Z, and time. So you're dealing with a four-dimensional problem space. You're trying to solve problems in a four-dimensional space. And that becomes a serious challenge for all fighter pilots. That's one of the things the fighter pilots have to learn how to do because it's not normally done in other regimes and other activities, and it's almost never taught. In some places, you might encounter teaching module to help you deal with problem solving in four-dimensional space, but I kind of doubt that there's many out there. I've never seen one. Okay, now in addition to all of that, there may be a lot of airplanes that are occupying the uh, airborne battle space. There may be a lot of friendly airplanes. There may be a lot of enemy airplanes. And there also may be a number of unknowns. There may be targets out there that we actually don't know if it's friendly or if it's hostile or if it's neutral. We just don't know. Nevertheless, there's going to be a lot of activity in this airborne battle space. And so your head's got to be up on a swivel. You have to be very, very alert to everything going on. And you have to be willing to actually take decisive action at a moment's notice. Air combat maneuvering requires one to get proficient in maneuvers. You should become proficient in many of the air combat maneuvers. You should become a maneuver master, or you should be able to master maneuver theory. There's a number of ways that you can say it, but basically air combat maneuvering requires a lot of training and a lot of exercises so as to get good. In this particular case, we're looking at a barrel roll attack. Happens to be my favorite maneuver, by the way, but there's a number of maneuvers that we use depending on the situation and the setup. Also, in some cases, we need to get to the battle space unseen. And now there's a number of ways to do it. Probably the best way, or at least one of the best ways to do it, is to go in below radar coverage. Go in at a low altitude and a very high speed such that any detection system is unable to detect you. And so we call it the low-level high-speed regime. It's rather difficult to deal with, but through practice and constant exercises, we get pretty good at it. All right, so the low-level high-speed regime, that may be an ingress and an egress. We have to do a low level. This was actually depicted in the Top Gun Maverick movie. If you remember, they were flying through the canyon, and they were below the canyon rim, and they were supposed to be going at very high speeds. And you notice that a lot of the practice sessions, they weren't able to make a couple of critical turns, all kinds of things. So low-level high speed became an important part of the mission, important part of a lot of the missions that I flew as well. This is a picture from the movie 13 Days. These are the FA Crusaders, actually the reconnaissance version of the FA Crusader, and that was used in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they went into the target, which happened to be Cuba, at very low altitudes and very high speeds, and they were undetected in doing so. These two airplanes and pilots who flew them were heroes of the Cold War. Here's another scene from that movie. It shows you what it might look like when you're going in as a flight of two at a very low altitude and very high speed to the target. Okay, a couple of other great pictures of the RFA Crusader. One of them you can see is rolling in to get into the low-level regime, and the other one on the right is already below the mountaintops. You can see it's already in the low-level environment. What is mission critical? A couple of things I want to point out here very briefly. There's a few things that we have to concern ourselves with often that is quite mission critical. And if we don't do this, if we don't address ourselves in a highly effective way to these mission critical situations and events, mission failure is likely to occur. I already mentioned before, one of the things that is mission critical is, in fact, time compression. We have to be able to deal with it in an effective way. This could terminate the mission if we don't deal with time compression very, very effectively. So time compression is mission critical. Also, velocity and energy. We have to have velocity and energy that is superior to what the enemy can bring to the battle space. I'm going to say that again for emphasis. Our velocity and energy package has to be superior to whatever the enemy can deliver. So we have to have a velocity and energy advantage going into the battle space. Remember that energy consists of three components: kinetic energy, potential energy, and chemical energy, which is also called propulsion energy. Also, we have to be able to think critically. Critical thinking is yes, I'm going to have to say that. Critical thinking is critical. All right. Critical thinking is, in fact, essential. Is a way that we are going to achieve a high level of combat effectiveness if we can think critically throughout the course of our mission. And last but not least on my list here, and that's not all there is, but we must avoid catastrophe. Catastrophe avoidance is important. We have to, above all, avoid catastrophe. Sometimes we have to exit the airborne battle space early so as to come back and fight another day, particularly if we are encountering overwhelming odds against us. We may want to exit the airborne battle space early. Catastrophe avoidance is absolutely crucial in any of these combat operations. How do we do that? We basically avoid the critical event horizon. Now, what does that mean? A critical event horizon means that unless properly managed, risk will continue to rise to a point beyond which catastrophe occurs. Okay, that point is called the critical event horizon. If we don't deal with catastrophe, or if we don't deal with a rising risk profile effectively, we will encounter catastrophe, and we will not achieve mission success. We will actually fail. Okay, now, once we have left the airborne battle space, we are now going to return to the aircraft carrier, so our mission is not over. This is also a high-stress operation, for sure, but with enough practice, we get pretty good at it. So, here we go. Return to the carrier. Approach and landing. Now, we have this whole operation is timed to the second. I'm not kidding. This is a very high precision operation. The Navy has got it down to the second or to the microsecond. We've been doing this for a very long period of time, and the Navy is very, very good at what it does here, for sure. Approach and landing. This is a picture, an actual picture of me on final approach to the USS Constellation flying the F-8 Crusader. Here's another picture. This happens to be the F-18 Hornet, Rhino. I think it's a Super Hornet or a Rhino. It looks like a Rhino to me. And that's on final approach. Notice that the hook is down as well. This is a painting. It's called Honor the Brave. It's in my collection of pictures and paintings. It actually depicts an F-8 Crusader on final approach to the USS Coral Sea. So it depicts an actual event. I actually landed on the Coral Sea, so we could say that this is a picture of me landing my F-8 Crusader on the Coral Sea, the USS Coral Sea. Here's another great picture on short final of an F-8 Crusader. You can see that the plane guard is in the background of the picture. That happens to be a destroyer escort. Short final. This is what it looks like. This is a picture taken out of the front of my airplane when I was on short final to the USS Constellation. You can see what the landing area looks like. You can see that there are 4 resting wires. You see that all of the airplanes are beyond the foul line. And it's a ready deck. And so it's ready, and I'm on short final, ready to touch down and hopefully catch a wire. Looking for a number 3 wire. But right now, it looks like it's a steady, stable approach. And that's me touching down. That's an actual picture of me just touching down on the USS Constellation. You notice that my hook is grabbed the wire. The wire is above the deck. You can see that. And is just at the point where the wire has been grabbed by the tail hook. You notice that the nose landing gear is still above the deck, and so the airplane has not yet rocked forward, but it will soon. In about a half a second, it will soon rock forward in its arrestment posture. And that is a picture of the USS Constellation. That was my home for my deployment aboard my Western Pacific deployment aboard the USS Constellation as a member of Carrier Task Force 77. Here's another picture. That's our home base. This happens to be, I think it's a Nimitz class carrier, but I don't have the number in front of me, so I'm not sure which one. It could be it could be a Nimitz, or it could be other large supercarriers. Okay, my book, The Sonic Warrior: Chronicles of a Top Gun Pioneer, that is also available anywhere books are sold. It's also available in audio book format. And that completes this discussion of the air combat mission as we then move ahead and show the film documentary, The Sonic Warrior. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all soon.